Several members of the Rockford community come together after witnessing what they call hate against migrants, immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers in the U.S.
WIFR reporter Alyssa Kelly spoke with those who attended Wednesday's event to hear their stories and the impact of hate on their lives.
I mean, treat others as you would want to be treated yourself. It's that simple. That's the golden rule.
For the members of Welcome with Dignity 815, strengthening our city and bringing people together is a mission. They want to correct myths surrounding immigration.
When our immigrant community thrives, we all thrive. But if they're being taunted at work, in their neighborhood, at schools, what is that doing to the human spirit?
Linda Zuba helped organize a gathering Wednesday where those who attended talked about those misconceptions. One she hears often is about asylum seekers.
Asylum seekers that are here, they're not illegals. They have a legal right to seek asylum. They are following protocols and procedures that are legal.
And according to Zuba, the problem gets worse during election years.
I truly believe that our leadership in this community, whether it's every organization or political leadership, needs to step up and say, this has to stop. But if our leaders or those running for office are helping to spread the lies, that doesn't help.
Armando Cardenas spoke at the event, highlighting his commitment to ending discrimination.
The election, there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of demonization of immigrants. Now it's time to talk about getting along with each other, respecting each other.
In Rockford, Alyssa Kelly, WIFR News.
An event similar to Wednesday's will be held at noon October 16th at Veterans Memorial Hall in Rockford. It will feature new speakers sharing their experiences.